Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is stumble. Let's take a moment and look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear stumble used is to mean to trip or briefly lose one's balance and almost fall. I know in previous videos I've talked about how I'm not very graceful, so this is a verb that an action I engage in pretty regularly. I'll be walking, and for whatever reason, I lose my balance. I don't fall to the ground, but I might have to move my feet or even sometimes my arms in a way to kind of catch myself and regain my balance. Related to this is a second definition of tripping repeatedly as one walks. Sometimes there can be a medical condition or other reason that might cause someone to have difficulty and sort of repeatedly almost lose their balance and fall. Now, we'll be talking about some other ways to use the verb stumble with our phrasal verbs, but for now, I want you to know that stumble is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, you're going to drop the E and then add ing to form stumbling. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now our base verb, stumble, ends in a voiced L sound. This means that the past tense ending is just going to make a D sound, and you're not going to add an extra syllable as you say it. So the past tense and participle forms should sound like this. Stumbled, stumbled. Now, as I promised, we would be discussing a number of phrasal verbs, and so that's what we're going to do today. We won't do any individual verb tense practice, but I'll try and remember to point out the different verb tenses that are being used in my example sentences. So let's start by talking about the phrasal verb stumble across. This could have a couple different meanings. One would be to meet or encounter someone by chance. An example of this might be, I stumbled across my former coworker last weekend. So this sentence is an example of a simple past tense, and this is actually something that happened to me last weekend. I was out, I didn't have plans, but I met or encountered someone I used to work with for many years, and it was a kind of a fun surprise. So this meet by chance, again, means no plan to do it. Now, a second way you might hear stumble across used is to mean to find, discover, or encounter something by chance. An example of this might be, my husband stumbled over old photos of his great-grandparents while cleaning. This is another simple past tense sentence and also a true statement. This is something that happened recently. He was cleaning and all of a sudden he was like, wow, Katie, look at this. This is my great-grandma and my great-grandpa. And we had a lot of fun looking through the photos. But we didn't have a plan to look for and then look at the photos that particular day. Another phrasal verb you might hear or see is to stumble on. You might also hear stumble upon. These two are going to be used in similar ways, and there are two ways we can use both of them. The first way you'll hear stumble on or stumble upon used is to mean to trip on something. So we're back to that original definition of the verb. An example of this might be careful or you'll stumble on one of these roots. Right? So roots, the things that kind of anchor trees and other plants in the ground. Sometimes trees' roots start to grow above ground. They get so big. And if you're out walking in a wooded area, it could be very easy to kind of trip, not see something, and lose your balance. So be careful or you'll stumble on is an example of the simple future using will. Now, a second way we can use stumble on or stumble upon is very similar to the second way we used stumble across. So again, we're talking about finding, discovering, encountering something by chance. An example of this. We stumble upon the cutest cafes and shops whenever we travel. This sentence is an example of the simple present. So here, if I'm speaking maybe for my husband and me, I'm talking about our habits, our routines. It means we discover these places by chance. We don't read a lot of reviews, make a plan. We're just out walking around and think, that looks interesting. Let's have a meal there, right? That's what that means. Now, let's continue talking about a few more phrasal verbs. The next one we're going to discuss is to stumble over. This can have a couple meanings. One would be to trip or almost fall as a result of bumping into someone or something. An example of this. He stumbled over his children's toys in the middle of the night. That's another simple past tense sentence, and maybe that's something that's happened to you as well. You've been walking, there's something on the ground, right, and it causes you to trip. A second way stumble over gets used is to mean to have difficulty saying something clearly or correctly. Now, as I wrote that definition, I thought of, I can think of a couple videos I've done that weren't so good. They weren't so clear. This is something that can happen to all of us. So an example sentence might be, she is stumbling over her words so much, I'm having trouble understanding. She is stumbling over is an example of present progressive or present continuous. So I hope you're not having that feeling as you're listening to this particular video. Now, the last phrasal verb we're going to discuss today is to stumble through. This can also have a couple meanings. One might be to make one's way through some place with very unsteady steps. An example of this might be, the man was stumbling through the streets. This is an example of past progressive or past continuous. I know with this definition, sometimes it might be easy to kind of picture or think of somebody who's been drinking too much. And so they're not walking maybe in a way they normally would. They're tripping, they're losing their balance. This verb stumble is perfect for that type of situation. The last way you might hear stumble through used is to mean to progress through some performance with a great deal of difficulty or in a very awkward way. Sometimes this phrasal verb gets used with performers. So this could be actors in the theater or someone else giving a performance. An example of this in a sentence might be, the actor has stumbled through several performances this week. So maybe this particular person isn't well prepared. Maybe there's something else medically going on with them that's making it really difficult for them to say their lines and perform or act in the way that they should. The actor has stumbled through is an example of the present perfect. Okay. Now let's move on and spend just a couple minutes looking at some words and phrases related to our verb stumble. And the first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of this word. So exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. Stumble as a noun means the act of stumbling, and this could be connected to any of those earlier definitions we've talked about. So that trip, it could be the act of discovering something, anything we've discussed earlier. An example of this might be, after many stumbles, she started using a cane. So here, there have been many acts or instances where somebody has tripped or maybe almost fallen. And so now they're using something to kind of help support them and prevent them from falling. Another word you might encounter is the noun stumbling block. This is used to describe something that is an obstacle or a barrier, something that is preventing you from making progress. An example of how this gets used is this question: Is Hungary the stumbling block to Ukraine's European Union membership? Okay. Now, if you watch a lot of these videos, you know I follow a lot of news. I read a lot of news articles and saw this question posed this week. So, what this question is asking is Hungary the reason or what is preventing Ukraine from being able to join this organization? One last thing for us to discuss today, and it's the phrase to stumble out of bed. What this means, this particular phrase means, is when someone's waking up and even getting up and getting out of bed, they're doing it with great difficulty. So, an example of how you might hear it used would be, he didn't stumble out of bed until 11 a.m. So, maybe this is a college student, a young adult who's stayed up late studying or doing something else, right? And now we're suggesting here that the act of waking up didn't even happen until very late in the morning. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.